Discover the surprising fears of Ottoman princesses, 5 incredible truths about their wedding night. Sarah Jones couldn't shake the feeling of being a ghost in the halls of Maplewood University. Each floor creaked and whispered of past scholars, but she could sense their judgment lingering in the air. Here was a 34-year-old history professor stood dressed sharply, yet her shoulders felt heavy under the burden of doubt. Today, as she eyed her lecture notes for the day, the title loomed like a spectral apparition: Discover the surprising fears of Ottoman princesses, 5 incredible truths about their wedding night. Would they listen? Or would the weight of her male colleague's skepticism engulf her? Standing among the tall, dusty shelves in the library felt like being trapped in a time warp, surrounded by countless volumes of history that felt worlds away from her struggle to get recognition for hers. The dismissive remarks of those she once called friends echoed through her mind. Princesses. Who cares, they sneered. Each taunt ignited a tightening knot in her stomach, forcing her to confront deeper fears that had haunted her too long. Was her obsession with Ottoman princesses just a misguided quest for validation, woven in between her relentless desire to break ground in a space dominated by men? As she rummaged through neglected archives, her fingers brushed against something fragile, a collection of letters that had slipped through the cracks of time. The elegant, pen-stroked words danced before her eyes, disclosing not only romantic yearnings but the raw fears these women faced in a world that offered no real freedom. Faces of her students flickered in her mind. They battled their own tidal waves of self-doubt and societal expectations. Frustration churned within her, juxtaposed against an awakening thrill. It was as if she had stumbled upon a hidden mirror reflecting her own fears of rejection, reinforcing that her voice deserved to be heard. Before her internal tug-of-war could intensify, a paralyzing thought pierced through her. She felt the sharp sting of betrayal bubbling beneath her skin. The colleague who had previously championed her work now seeded doubt among their peers, whispering that her research lacked academic rigor, that it was merely an emotional niche she clung to. She wouldn't allow herself to crumble at the hands of another. Did he not realize the collective burden she bore, a lifetime molded in the shadow of gendered expectations? The tension in their next encounter turned electric, a tangible battle of ideals unfurling amid the stiff library air. As their voices rose, it was as though past and present collided, and her mind whirled. Merit versus influence. How could she draw parallels between their pain and her own? Before she could become lost in this turmoil, a higher calling beckoned. The revelation hit her like a shockwave. One of those long-ago princesses was her distant ancestor. The discovery poured gasoline on the fire of her determination. Not only was she battling for her rightful place in academia, but now she fought for honest representation of her lineage. The narrative had shifted. She could redefine her legacy, yet insecurities nipped at her heels. Could she do these women's stories justice? With her presentation looming like a gathering storm, Sarah wrestled against the rising tide of anxiety. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Suddenly, rumors swirled through the faculty like dry leaves in the fall. The anonymous letter was a call to arms against her credibility as a scholar. Her heart raced, clenching tightly as she pondered the impending lecture. Would she rise from obscurity, or sink further into anonymity? The air thickened, the weight of her reality settled in her bones. Clenching her fists, she prepared to unveil her findings. As she opened her mouth to speak, silence washed over the room like a tidal wave, leaving the outcome teetering precariously in the air, and her unresolved fears clashing violently against the truth she had unearthed, a truth now intertwined with her own story. As Sarah stood before her audience, the silence swallowed her. Each face before her appeared scrutinizing, as if they bore witness not just to her words but to her very essence, a vulnerable woman daring to tread where few would. She drew a deep breath. The lecture notes, once a crutch, transformed into a lifeline. Confidence surged within her as she recalled the letters from the archives, the whispered fears of distant princesses. She began, weaving their stories into her own, allowing her voice to climb above the murmur of doubt that threatened to dismantle her resolve. The Ottoman princesses faced immense pressures, she articulated, her voice clear, bound by the expectations of their roles, often sacrificed for the dynastic ambitions of their families. They were not mere pawns in tales of grandeur, they grappled with fear, much like you and I do today. A shift occurred in the room, heads that once seemed fixed in skepticism began to nod. With each word, the fog of uncertainty lifted slightly. An undercurrent of introspection coursed through her students who appeared to connect with the centuries-old fears as if they were their own. The significance of her research began to reverberate beyond the academic confines she once feared. The stories took on lives of their own, touching a chord deep within every listener. However, as she reached the pivotal point in her lecture, the electric atmosphere around her foreshadowed the turbulence beneath. She dared to confront the criticisms that had suffocated her passion. "There is strength in vulnerability," she declared, scanning the room. "These women expressed their fears, and I stand here today because of the risks they took to voice their own narratives. Who are we to shy away from similar truths?" A few of her colleagues exchanged uneasy glances. Their expressions flickered between disbelief and admiration. A surge of warmth spread through her chest, but the specter of her betrayer loomed larger. Would they undermine her, dismiss her newfound confidence as mere bravado? As she concluded, Sarah felt a rising tide of exhilaration mixed with anxiety. "It's our duty to tell the untold stories," she reminded her audience, "to illuminate the complexities of our fears and triumphs. In shedding light on the past, we reclaim the narratives that shape our futures." Applause erupted, yet somewhere in the cacophony, she sensed a shadow of doubt. Was her success genuine, or merely a fleeting moment of acceptance birthed from bold words? The moment mustered both pride and reflection. She had unveiled the fears of Ottoman princesses, but what about her own? Deeper doubts churned beneath her newfound sense of purpose. Had she truly begun to carve her unique space in this male-dominated academic world? As she made her way out of the auditorium, the relief of the moment gradually gave way to an uncomfortable realization: the battle for respect was far from over. The weight of that anonymous letter lingered heavily, a constant reminder that her struggles were just beginning. The whispers behind her back crept into her consciousness, darkening the edges of her triumph. Confronted with her doubts and the lurking threats, Sarah's resolve strengthened. She needed clarity. Revealing truths already electrified her passion, but facing her detractors would require a different kind of courage. It was time to confront those who had dismissed her. Her mind churned with plans as she walked through the bustling corridors. A battle was on the horizon, and she wouldn't shy away any longer. With her heart racing, she loaded her mind with determination. She could no longer be the silent player in her story. An unmistakable truth echoed within her: she must reclaim her narrative and silence her critics. The time had come to face her colleague head-on, to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Would she emerge victorious, or would his venomous whispers drown her out? The battle beckoned, igniting a fire in her to assert her rightful place in academia, to demand recognition not just for herself, but for the voices of generations past. As Sarah navigated the labyrinth of the university's hallways, the pulse of her ambition quickened with each step. Her lecture had been a revelation, igniting a spark she hadn't realized was there. Each clap of the audience echoed in her mind, but it was the silent conversations and skeptical glances that clawed at her resolve. With each synchronized footfall against the polished floor, a strategy began to crystallize in her mind. The whispers by her colleagues weren't just noise, they were barriers to be dismantled. She envisioned herself standing before those who would undermine her, weaponizing her newfound confidence as a shield. No longer would she accept injury in silence. The time for fighting back had arrived, but first, she had to understand the depth of the dissent. Who exactly had orchestrated the criticism? The remembered bitterness of the anonymous letter resurfaced, the crisp paper taunting her. What they had called a quaint ambition was her lifeblood. Sarah's fingers tingled with the urge to reach for her phone, to send an email, to initiate the confrontation. She paused just outside her office door, heart thumping in her chest. "Sarah, could we chat?" The voice belonged to Nathaniel, her primary antagonist, a colleague who thrived on superiority, his criticism like a hawk ready to swoop at any sign of vulnerability. Tension pooled in her stomach as she turned to him. "Of course," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. This was the moment she was preparing for, yet doubt clawed at the edges of her confidence. Inside her office, the walls seemed to close in, suffocating her resolve momentarily. Nathaniel leaned casually against her desk, arms crossed, a smirk twisted on his lips as though he already had her pinned. "I have to admit, that was bold of you," he said. "But bold doesn't always equate to academic rigor, does it?" The words dripped with condescension, and Sarah felt a fire ignite within her. The passion she derived from the pain of her subjects surged forward. What did they have to fear compared to this? "What I presented was based on thorough research," she asserted, each syllable carefully clipped. "The fears of those Ottoman princesses reflect struggles we face today. It's about honesty and vulnerability." His expression shifted, annoyance flickering in his icy demeanor. "And yet, vulnerability won't shield you from scrutiny or from the Academy's expectations. You've got to bring more to the table than historical anecdotes." As he spoke, Sarah realized his words weren't simply aimed at her work, they were a veiled assessment of her worth within this male-dominated space. She clenched her fists under the desk, battling the wave of self-doubt attempting to crash over her. "What do you suggest? Pretending these stories don't matter? That the emotional truths of their lives are insignificant? Maybe just stick to the facts," he said dismissively, brushing off her emotions. "Otherwise, you could confuse yourself into thinking your narrative is worth more than it is." Confusion threatened to occupy her mind. Was he attempting to negotiate power back to himself, or truly dismissing her voice? The answer didn't matter, the battle lay clear. With a deep breath, Sarah decided that this conversation alone wouldn't win her battle, but it was a crucial skirmish nonetheless. "I'm not confused, Nathaniel. My narrative is intimately intertwined with their truth. Shouldn't we, as academics, be challenging the status quo instead of cowering behind it?" His eyes narrowed, logic failing him as their words clashed. For a moment, the silence between them thickened, she felt the tension blister in the air. Exhaling slowly, Sarah straightened, channeling her inner resolve. She would confront the weight of his disdain head-on. "You may have opinions about my methods, but they won't shape my academic journey. I am here to illuminate stories that deserve to be heard. If you can't appreciate that, perhaps it speaks volumes about your own fears concerning authenticity and vulnerability." The moment was electrifying, a seismic shift in their dynamics. As she spoke, she recognized her voice not only as a stake in the ground but as a promise to all those whose voices had been muted. Yet, as Nathaniel turned and strode away, a new unease lingered. Was this confrontation merely the first of many? Or had she unwittingly struck a nerve in a battle that would only escalate? The pulse of her determination fluctuated against the backdrop of uncertainty. All at once, she understood the distance still to go. Time would tell if her defiance had fortified her place in academia or unraveled the very fabric of her ambitions. With her resolve simmering, a revelation sparked. This wouldn't just be a battle for recognition, it was a crusade to reclaim a narrative silenced for too long. What unexpected challenges lay ahead as she ventured deeper into this tumultuous landscape? The air thick with the promise of imminent conflict, Sarah readied herself for another confrontation that loomed just beyond the horizon. The next day dawned with a sharpened sense of purpose. Sarah entered the university with an intensity that electrified her every step. The confrontation with Nathaniel had propelled her forward, igniting a determination she hadn't entirely acknowledged before. While her heart raced with the excitement of possibility, a shadow of anxiety lingered. What discoveries would this day hold? Her first class was an opportunity to reclaim ownership over her narrative. She had always centered historical analysis within her syllabus, but now, the notion of blending emotional truth into her lectures felt both daring and necessary. As her students filed in, their chatter ebbed like the tide, and she sensed a willingness to engage, a stark contrast to what she had anticipated. "Today, we're going to discuss an area of history often overlooked," she said, her voice steady but vibrant. She began to weave the struggles of the Ottoman princesses into a narrative that felt alive, colorful, and urgent. She challenged her students to consider not just the political implications of royal marriages but the personal emotions that defined those moments. When the discussion turned towards the significance of vulnerability in leadership, raised eyebrows and nods of acknowledgement surrounded her. This was transformative. The stories she had once hesitated to share were now sparking animated debates. It occurred to her that her power was not only in her research but in her ability to relate the experiences of the past to the emotions of the present. After class, one of the quieter students approached her, shyly clutching a notepad. "Professor, I really loved what you said today. It's refreshing to hear history told as more than just dates and facts. Do you think it's possible to write our own histories?" The question hung in the air, a potent admission of the struggles students today faced. Sarah's heart swelled with pride at the realization that she was nurturing a budding curiosity in others, something she had once yearned for during her own studies. It clicked within her. Her commitment to these stories had the power to motivate those around her. As she left the classroom, a renewed sense of confidence enveloped her. She couldn't ignore Nathaniel's dismissal, but his words only stoked the fire. Not only would she dissect the status quo, she would deconstruct it piece by piece. In the coming days, she planned to craft her syllabus to spotlight the untold emotional journeys of history, empowering her students to question their perspectives. However, networking with supportive colleagues became essential. A gathering of like-minded professors was scheduled for later that week. She hesitated briefly, wondering if she would face the resistant undertow again. But this was about more than just Nathaniel. It was about her place in academia and the allies she needed to cultivate. At the gathering, voices swirled around her as discussions on research and publications filled the room. Sarah felt emboldened to contribute, waiting for an opening to share her vision. But then she spotted Nathaniel at the back, gesturing animatedly with a group of his allies. The knot in her stomach tightened, memories of the previous day's confrontation flooding back. With each brave hour spent among this crowd, doubt lingered in her throat, but she swallowed it down. This was not a time for retreat but for stepping forward. She sought to engage more sincerely and learned that Nathaniel was scheming against her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Gathering data to challenge her lecturing style in front of the faculty board. In that moment, revelation struck her. This was not just a battle for respect, but one for survival in an academic environment that had historically silenced diverse narratives. To win this war of words, setting a stance was no longer enough. She needed strategy, allies, and the narratives of the oppressed at her back. As she caught a glance from Nathaniel, who seemed to feel the ripples of her determination, she vowed to sharpen her approach. She would not just gather stories, she would transform them into an ethos. What incident would kindle the clash that was surely forthcoming? Unseen forces were beginning to draw tight around her ambitions. What maneuvers would she employ as she prepared to confront the very foundation of her aspirations? The tension crackled in the air like electricity, leaving her anxious for her next move. The increasing pressure began to weigh heavily on Sarah, distorting the excitement that had initially propelled her forward. As she planned her new syllabus, ideas darted around her mind like fireflies illuminating paths yet to be traveled. Yet, a lingering doubt tugged at her. Would her narrative be powerful enough to change the course she had set? In the days leading up to the gathering of professors, Sarah spent her nights dragging out volumes of historical texts and unearthing obscure details of the past. Information flowed in torrents, but what struck her most was not merely what these women endured, but their emotional landscapes, the fears, hopes, and desires that were consuming in their own right. As she began to piece together her lessons, her heart swelled with a newfound purpose and the certainty that every story she uncovered could resonate with the struggles of the now. On the eve of the gathering, Sarah stood in front of her bathroom mirror. The reflection stared back, uncertain yet determined, a blend she hadn't previously encountered in her professional life. An academic armor was beginning to form around her, and she found herself testing the strength of her resolve. She would not let Nathaniel's sabotage destroy the very core of her academic passion. The gathering felt electric. Colleagues buzzed with anticipation as they shared insights and experiences, each voice a thread in the tapestry of academia. Sarah had come prepared. She rehearsed her speech in her mind, but the moment she took the floor, the intensity gripped her, thoughts slipped like sand through her fingers. She caught Nathaniel's eyes again, cold and critical, but instead of faltering, she drew strength from the palpable energy in the room. "I want to tell you about the untold stories of the Ottoman princesses," she declared, her voice unfurling with authority she hadn't known before. "We often discuss their roles as dynasties and pawns in political arrangements, but what of their emotional truths? Today's leadership is fraught with complexities of personal sacrifice and vulnerability in pursuit of power. Isn't it essential that we illuminate these narratives?" The room quieted, absorbing her words. She could feel the shift, their eyes ignited with curiosity rather than skepticism. Each moment unfolded, revealing the true power of vulnerability she had always so deeply feared to expose. This was not merely about defending her teaching style, it was about reshaping the discourse of history itself. She noticed a few nodding heads, including those of some colleagues she hadn't expected to resonate with her vision. The script she'd envisioned in her mind began to weave itself through their expressions, igniting a wave of discussions that broke through barriers she believed were insurmountable. Could this be her chance to cultivate alliances? Yet, amidst the warmth of camaraderie, she spotted Nathaniel again. His expression was one of simmering disdain, eyes darting as he whispered to a few colleagues, the devious energy wrapping around her like a shroud. The kernel of fear sprouted within her, igniting another realization: this skirmish with Nathaniel was just the prelude to a far more significant battle for respect and influence. The gathering culminated in an energetic exchange of ideas, but the unease of Nathaniel's presence lingered. She concluded with an appeal for openness and coalition building in their narratives. The hesitation she felt earlier vanished, replaced by determination to fortify her stance. As she left the gathering, Sarah felt emboldened yet acutely aware that the next phase of her journey lay before her, rife with unknown alliances and looming opposition. The seed of a counterattack against Nathaniel had been planted, but how would she navigate that delicate landscape without compromising her values? An upcoming faculty board meeting loomed on the horizon, and Sarah realized this would be the stage for a confrontation far beyond her classroom. The whispers of malevolence in the air danced teasingly, drafting an impending storm. How would she prepare to defend not only her teaching but the whole narrative she had begun to craft? The challenge ahead held the promise of revelation, a test of her growth and fortitude, ready to unfold. The faculty board meeting dawned, a seemingly ordinary event transformed into an arena of unspoken tensions. As Sarah adjusted her notes, she felt the weight of expectation tucked uncomfortably behind her sternum. The polished table loomed ahead, a battleground where alliances would either flourish or falter. As chairs scraped and colleagues settled, she breathed in sharply, relying on the strategies she had meticulously gathered over the preceding days, equipping her not just for this meeting, but also against Nathaniel. He arrived late, of course, striding in with an air that was both arrogant and dismissive. His colleagues greeted him with reluctant respect, as if magnetically pulled by his reputation rather than any cordiality. Sarah clenched her jaw, forcing herself to focus on the agenda. She couldn't afford to show any signs of uncertainty. A soft chatter echoed around her, but confusion clouded her insides. This wasn't just about her professional ambitions, it was about her identity as an academic. Once the formalities began, a palpable tension thickened the air like humidity. A few agenda items passed without much discussion, but Sarah's heart raced when the topic of new syllabi arose. She could already feel Nathaniel's eyes assessing her, dissecting her thoughts, and preparing to counter her every claim. He launched into his critique, methodically pecking away at various proposals, dismissing innovative ideas as impractical and frivolous. It was a classic display of his effortless manipulation, and he had an audience willing to lend him support. Drawing a deep breath, Sarah's throat tightened, but then a flicker of resolve ignited somewhere deep within. She raised her hand, breaking through the cadence of Nathaniel's critique. Actually, I believe there's value in exploring the emotional narratives of historical figures. Our students deserve more than just facts, they deserve to connect with these stories on a human level, she asserted, allowing her words to spill out like a soft yet firm tide. A couple of colleagues appeared intrigued, heads nodding, while others exchanged guarded glances. Nathaniel's lips curled into a mocking smile. He relished this battleground. "And what evidence do you have to support this, Sarah? Emotion in the context of history is subjective at best. Should we care more about romantic ideals than factual accuracy?" Each word dripped with condescension. Sarah felt the heat rise in her face, time seeming to freeze as internal tumult roiled between her consciousness and subconsciousness. Here it was, her fear realized. Yet, in that turbulent moment of self-doubt, clarity washed over her. This wasn't merely about defending a personal view, it was an opportunity to carve her niche in the academic discourse, an invitation to confront Nathaniel on his own terms. "I understand and respect your point, Nathaniel, but that same subjectivity is what fosters deep engagement among students. We must cultivate empathy and understanding of the human experience, especially as educators," she challenged, determination seeping into her voice. In the span of a heartbeat, the silence shifted. A few faces looked at her considerately, while others scowled, revealing fractures in the academic facade. Would this be enough to rally support? The chair encouraged further discussion, and Sarah capitalized on the opening. She painted a vivid picture of Ottoman princesses imagining their fears, hopes, and longing. A room of academics, softening, listening intently as she spoke. She could feel her confidence swelling, pushing out the shadows of doubt, but gripping at her resolve was the unsettling awareness of Nathaniel's simmering disdain. He interjected once more, questioning her choice of focus, a thinly veiled effort to undermine her, blurring the line between critique and intimidation. Yet, now she felt stronger. His tactics were transparent, they wouldn't sing in isolation anymore. As the meeting concluded, Sarah realized she had stepped through a threshold. Each encounter with Nathaniel intensified her conviction to rise against his machinations. However, seeds of doubt still lingered. Success in this encounter didn't guarantee future triumphs. The looming specter of Nathaniel haunted her thoughts as she exited. She found herself pondering the uncharted territory of her influence moving forward, how to navigate these precarious dynamics without sacrificing her foundational values. The faculty board's shifting allegiances had ignited a new wave of urgency within her. Would she learn not merely to engage with critiques but to master them, reconfiguring her interactions to shape her narrative? The next faculty meeting would reveal the depths of this challenge. For now, the question remained, could she transform vulnerability into a weapon of strength, or would she fall prey to the very forces striving to silence her voice? As Sarah stepped into the cool evening air, she felt the tremors of an impending confrontation echoing in her heart, a battleground of personal evolution ready to be unveiled. Navigating the aftermath of the meeting felt like traversing a minefield. As Sarah returned to her cluttered office, the weight of those exchanges lingered. Impassioned words had flowed from her that day, but the haunting echoes of their potential consequences reverberated in her mind. Nathaniel's dismissive poise unnerved her, and beneath his veneer of confidence lay the sharp edges of ruthless ambition, an ambition she now recognized as a formidable obstacle to her own. Seated at her desk, Sarah stared out the window, the fading daylight casting long shadows that danced across her piles of books and papers. The silence around her was oppressive, and she could almost hear Nathaniel's voice replaying in her thoughts, disassembling each argument she had laid out with surgical precision. Panic fluttered in her chest. Had she truly made any significant progress? The firm knot in her stomach reminded her that this was no mere academic skirmish, it was a crossing of boundaries, a demographic of ideals that she felt compelled to defend. With her notepad spread open before her, she focused on formulating her next steps. Either she could retreat, allowing Nathaniel to envelop her in his critique, or she could strategically expand on her thesis, reinforcing the narrative she believed in. What if she gathered data to support her argument? Engaging with her students, surveying their perspectives on emotional engagement with historical narratives, could provide tangible evidence for her claims. Excitement ignited her sluggish thoughts. She quickly scribbled a plan, outlining what she would need: interview questions, an analysis framework, and a systematic approach to teaching that balanced emotion with factual rigor. with each item added to her list, a new resolve washed over her. The precarious balance between empathy and historical accuracy suddenly felt like a powerful axis upon which to pivot. She would harness her vulnerabilities, turning them into a research initiative that not only defended her perspective but also anchored her value as an educator. Her enthusiasm, however, was tinged by a lingering question: would her colleagues accept this approach? Even if her students connected with her, could she convert that into academic validation within the tightly controlled sphere of the faculty? As she contemplated these uncertainties, an urgency began to eclipse her self-doubt. The following week brought another meeting, an opportunity for Sarah to present her findings, but also a chance for Nathaniel to regroup and strategize against her. Under the flickering fluorescent lights of the meeting room, she hoped to capitalize on their earlier discourse, rolling into the new agenda with insight born from her research. But the thought of Nathaniel again evaluating her intentions with skepticism filled her with tension. As the date approached, she focused inward, visualizing the classroom surveys and student interactions she planned to conduct. How could she leverage their feedback to wield influence over the very faculty that had once doubted her? Yet, embedded in her mind was the specter of Nathaniel, waiting in the shadows for an opening to undermine her undoubtedly ambitious pursuits. The tenuous support she had felt during her last confrontation could easily be extinguished in a single dismissive remark. Would her colleagues spiral back towards Nathaniel's perspectives, or had she sparked enough curiosity to create a fissure in their unyielding ideologies? The knowledge she had gained in preparing for the upcoming meeting expanded her confidence, yet it also made clear the profound challenges ahead. Personal and professional stakes had entwined irrevocably, forming a complex web of accountability and aspiration. As Sarah steeled herself for the next confrontation, she realized she was on the brink of something transformative, not just for her career but for her understanding of fear, connection, and the educational environment she wished to cultivate. But as she readied herself, a text notification interrupted her thoughts, a terse message from Nathaniel that read, "Looking forward to our next discussion. I hope you're ready." The challenge hung in the air, charged with anticipation. The stakes had been raised, and as Sarah stared at her phone, her heart raced with the realization that the time had come to face him, not just as an adversary but as a catalyst for her own growth. The meeting day dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the tumult inside Sarah's mind. As she arrived early at the university, the familiar halls felt strangely alien, each echo of her footsteps a reminder of her vulnerability. Today was not merely about presenting data. It was about standing her ground in an arena saturated with skepticism. Nervous energy surged through her as she meticulously arranged her notes on the conference table. She could feel the pressure of several eyes scrutinizing her, judging her every move even before she began. The clock ticked down, and with each passing second, she battled with her doubts. Would her research withstand scrutiny? Would her colleagues value the emotional dimension she sought to champion? Or would Nathaniel's logical framework suffocate her efforts once again? As the faculty members filed in, Sarah's resolve transformed into a steely determination. The earlier discomfort was now a fog parting to reveal her crystallized purpose. She knew her assessment through student surveys would shine light onto a facet of education often overlooked, one that resonated with the very human experience she sought to defend. This wasn't just an academic discussion. It was a plea for depth in a superficial discourse. She opened the meeting with a brief overview of her objectives, ensuring to maintain eye contact, especially with Nathaniel, whose critical gaze she sensed lingering on her. As she transitioned into the survey results, she presented the qualitative data collected from her students. Their testimonials touched on fears, hopes, and experiences intertwined with history and emotional tapestry that contrasted sharply with Nathaniel's dispassionate assertions. Through engagement, she asserted, students form emotional connections to historical figures, translating into a nuanced understanding of events. This is not mere sentiment, it's how history can be taught meaningfully. The room fell silent, a few nodding hesitantly, while Nathaniel remained impassive, arms crossed, a stone wall against her enthusiasm. Her heart raced, but she pressed on. The moment was pivotal, an opportunity to shift the discussion from dry academic exercises toward a more holistic educational approach that infused narrative and empathy into history. But then came the challenge, as Sarah had anticipated. Nathaniel interjected with confidence. While I appreciate anecdotal evidence, do you have empirical data that substantiates this emotional approach? Without that, we are only engaging in what could be considered storytelling rather than scholarship. His voice was laden with condescension. A flash of frustration ignited within Sarah, but she tempered it with deep breaths. It was time to confront him directly, to not only defend her position but also assert her capabilities. Isn't history itself enriched by the stories we share? She replied, her voice steady despite the tension. The emotional truths captured in these narratives can lead students to deeper learning. Why must we dismiss the voice of personal experience, especially when it has proven to resonate so profoundly within the classroom? There was a moment of shared silence. The tension thickened as she looked around the table, gauging reactions. Some professors shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances that signaled growing interest. Perhaps she had planted a seed of doubt against Nathaniel's rigid stance. The conversation spiraled into a broader discussion about teaching methodologies, with Sarah skillfully weaving her ideas into the fabric of the debate. She was navigating every point with increased confidence, transforming her vulnerability into strength. But she knew she needed more than just a passionate argument. She needed to integrate data analytics to keep her colleagues at bay. With the meeting coming to an end, Sarah felt the atmosphere shift. An unexpected ally, a fellow faculty member, posed a thought-provoking question that encouraged further exploration of her topic. Hope flickered within her as she felt the tide beginning to turn, but just as the meeting concluded, Nathaniel's smirk returned, and with another cutting remark he declared, "All modifications are welcome, as long as they remain grounded within the confines of traditional pedagogy." His words reverberated ominously, knotting Sarah's stomach once more. Was this a mere tactic to derail the progress she had made, or a warning of the continuing battle she faced within the faculty? As she walked away, determination flooded through her veins, igniting a fierce resolve. She would not only prove the value of her approach but also confront Nathaniel on his turf. Yet, beneath the fervor simmered a more profound concern. How much of herself was she willing to stake against someone who could dismantle her findings with a single phrase? The next chapter of her journey loomed ahead, winding with uncertainties as she prepared for the challenges to come. The echoes of Nathaniel's voice haunted her, but in the shadows, she could hear the emerging chorus of her students, urging her onward, as she clung to the hope that transformation lay just beyond the horizon. The following morning, Sarah sat hunched over her laptop in her cramped office, the buzz of caffeinated focus coursing through her veins. The backdrop of her university provided the noise of life beyond her walls, yet within her mind, an urgent calm prevailed as she plotted her next steps. The confrontation with Nathaniel had unearthed new resolve, a determination to ripple through the research landscape before her, blurring the lines between calculated educational methodologies and the very human stories behind them. Focus shifted from survival to advancement. Sarah recognized that mere emotional appeals would not quench the skepticism of her peers. She needed empirical support, studies designed to capture the intricacies of emotional engagement, and integrate them with classroom practices. With resolve sharpening her instincts, she dove into literature reviews, combing through psychological studies that explored the cognitive benefits of emotional connections in learning. In the days that followed, the library became both refuge and battleground. Outside, students meandered, laughing, oblivious to her fervent scribblings and coffee-stained pages. Sarah dug deeper, unveiling data that substantiated her claims. Students not only remembered emotionally resonant lessons, they thrived. Their performance in assessments built upon projects infused with narrative richness far outpaced those tethered solely to rote memorization. Each statistic bolstered her confidence, yet doubts whispered insistently at the corners of her consciousness. What if Nathaniel dismissed this newfound data as insufficient? She needed something punchier, something that rendered the emotional engagements less subjective. Burrowing down the rabbit hole of research seemed never-ending, every discovery bringing her one step closer, yet fanning the flame of her anxieties. One afternoon, as rain pattered against the library's window, Sarah stumbled upon a case study about a classroom employing emotional storytelling techniques to elevate historical comprehension among underprivileged students. The results leaped off the page, test scores soared, and student retention increased. It was the breakthrough that turned her resolve into actionable strategy. Fueled with newfound inspiration, Sarah constructed a proposal that wove together her qualitative student surveys with this powerful quantitative data. The fusion felt electric, a thesis born from an embrace of both narratives and numbers. With every keystroke, her confidence surged, transforming her work from a patchwork of anecdotes to a robust research initiative, ready for robust scrutiny, yet shadows from her last meeting with Nathaniel loomed persistently. Would he merely dissect her proposal with surgical precision? She felt the churning blend of excitement and apprehension, balancing her burgeoning optimism against the threat of potential dismissal. As she meticulously crafted her proposal into a presentation, the reflections of her students echoed in her mind, reminding her of the stakes. This was about more than just her career, it was about advocating for a teaching style that could transform learning experiences for generations. But fragility lingered in the depths of her resolve. What if her newly minted data fell short? Was she risking everything on the mere pulse of educational reform? With a meticulously organized stack of notes in hand, she prepared for another round at the faculty meeting. In the back of her mind, a question emerged, delicate yet demanding: could she confront Nathaniel not just to defend, but to invite him into finding common ground? He was, after all, a formidable intellect. The afternoon sun pierced through the clouds outside, illuminating her office, yet inside, shadows stirred, forgotten fears resurfacing. The moment for confrontation and clarity drew nearer. Had she finally found the strength to challenge Nathaniel head-on, or was this yet another exercise in futility layered with uncertainty? The faculty meeting awaited, and with it, a crossroads that could define her career and her vision for education itself. As she stood, gathering her notes and targeting the door, she felt one last wave of uncertainty crashing over her. Was this a moment of liberation or of impending confrontation? What would she reveal about herself? Courage, vulnerability, or perhaps an entirely unforeseen capability? With every step echoing the rhythm of her heartbeat, she knew the answer loomed closer. The faculty meeting commenced in the familiar conference room, its atmosphere heavy with unspoken tension. Sarah positioned herself at the table, her heart hammering in her chest. Today marked a pivot point in her academic journey. Armed with validated research and a newly forged sense of purpose, she was ready to assert her right to tell emotionally resonant stories within the framework of historical education. As the meeting unfolded, Nathaniel perched at the far end, draped in his signature air of superiority, his eyes narrowed like a hawk's. Sarah could feel the pressure of the room weighing on her. She quickly glanced at her carefully prepared notes, reaffirming the narrative she had passionately pieced together over countless hours. This was not just about her, it meant much more: a fight against the academic norms that had suffocated the voices of many. When the discussion shifted to innovative teaching methods, Sarah seized the moment. I've conducted research demonstrating how emotional engagement enhances students' understanding of history, she initiated, her voice steady, infused with conviction. By blending narratives with emotional truths, we can create deeper connections that transcend mere facts. The response was mixed. A few colleagues looked intrigued while Nathaniel leaned back, arms crossed in skepticism, a trace of a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. Interesting, but where's the empirical evidence? He challenged, his tone dripping with condescension. Without rigorous data, we might as well call this storytelling, not scholarship. Beneath the veneer of confidence, Sarah felt a wave of doubt surge. But then, she remembered the research studies she had uncovered. The vibrant transformation of students learning through emotional narratives served as her lifeline. Gathering strength, she nodded patiently. I have it right here, she said, unfurling her proposal with precision. Empirical evidence shows that students related significantly better to lessons infused with emotional relevance, leading to improved retention and performance metrics. With every word, she saw an evolution in the dynamics of the room. Colleagues shifted in their seats, some visibly intrigued by her assertiveness. The conversation began to swirl around her proposal, allowing her the space to amplify her case. While history has traditionally focused on dates and events, she continued, confidence blossoming, there is profound value in considering the emotional landscapes of historical figures. By doing so, we can equip students not just to learn history, but to feel it. They can relate to the aspirations, fears, and motivations that drive people to act throughout time. It was exhilarating to witness the shift, a spark igniting as she articulated the multidimensional fabric of history. The energy in the room oscillated, several peers began engaging, sharing insights, building off her ideas, and challenging conventional thought. Nathaniel, though visibly strained by her enthusiasm, could not dismiss the growing interest. His usual retorts faltered against the tide of renewed conversations around her. As discussions bubbled in the room, Sarah felt a powerful sense of vindication. No longer merely an academic underdog striving for recognition, she had proven her mettle and demanded respect. The tone had shifted, skepticism was yielding to collaboration. By the end of the meeting, a committee was formed to explore integrating emotional narrative methodologies into their curriculum, a victory that felt monumentally affirming. Sarah hardly believed what had just transpired. The courage she had summoned, the research she had wielded, and the stories she had told all converged to redefine her academic presence. With nods of acknowledgement from her peers echoing in her mind, she left the room, heart racing not with doubt, but with a radiant sense of accomplishment. Sarah had driven home the importance of emotional narratives within academia while confronting the very doubts that had stifled her for far too long. The journey wasn't over. Pressure would continue from Nathaniel and others like him. However, she was armed with resilience, not just for herself, but also for the ancestral narratives of those Ottoman princesses that had guided her. As she stepped outside, the clouds that had once loomed overhead began to lift, revealing the brightness of new possibilities. Sarah tasted freedom, her voice reclaimed, her narrative firmly established, and she felt the excitement of her future unfurling before her like a vast horizon of untold stories, waiting to be discovered. Now is the moment for you to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep us growing. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.